Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys a list of the top 10 most satisfying fidget knives, or knives with fidget factor. This list is entirely based on my own opinion. It's also based on knives that I've actually handled. So while there's literally hundreds and hundreds of options out there and millions of different opinions and preferences on this stuff, I can only tell you guys what I've, my opinion based on what I've handled. And in this case, it's actually going to be just knives that I've actually reviewed. So for those of you who don't like this screen recorded stuff and you're like, well, show the physical knives. I actually have reviewed each and every one of these knives, physically holding the object and giving my comprehensive opinions in 15 to 20 minute full reviews on my YouTube channel, so you can check those out. They are sorted into playlists. These are in no particular order, and we're going to start off here with a few honorable mentions. I will start off by saying this. There are no ballast songs on this list. I know, there's a lot of people like, what? That's like arguably the most fidgety knife, right? Some people really love those, and I have to incorporate satisfaction into fidget factor, right? It's one thing to be fidgety. It's another thing for it to be satisfying. And considering I am not good with a ballast song, I can't do any of that stuff, it's not very satisfying. I just end up bruising my knuckles or cutting myself. It's just not very fun, right? Ballast songs aren't my favorite thing, but for those of you who find a lot of joy in ballast songs, hey, that's great. I respect people who can do that stuff. I just can't do it. These are in no particular order. I can't remember if I mentioned that, but anyways, thanks so much to my patrons who are supporting me right now. If you're enjoying the daily content uploads on this channel and you'd like to support me, there is a link for my Patreon right down in the description, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. We're going to start off here with stuff that actually is available. Some of the knives on this list are not available. I will link everything right down in the description so you guys can go check this stuff out for yourself. Starting out with some honorable mentions here. This is the Manix 2, not quite on the list, but it is an honorable mention. That cage lock is pretty cool. You can whip this thing open and shut. It is pretty satisfying. Given that it is a Spyderco, there's multiple means of deployment. It can be a little bit tight. It can be a little bit finicky, right? Once you get used to it, people are either going to really love it or really hate it. I actually really liked the Manix 2, but I think there are some better options out there. This is undoubtedly a great tool. It is very easy to manipulate, and the lock is very strong. I just don't love it quite as much as I used to, and the actuation isn't quite as smooth as today's modern knife enthusiast would expect, right? But it's pretty good, so honorable mention. Moving on here, pretty much any Benchmade knife with the axis lock. This thing used to be the king of fidget factor, and I'm sure, not just specifically this knife, but Benchmade knives with axis locks used to be the absolute king of fidget factor. And, whether you've handled a Benchmade or not, it's likely you've handled some knife with an axis-style lock now that the patent is no longer, there's no restrictions on it, even though lots of companies out there have been using them for a really long time without permission from Benchmade, right? It's great. It's easy to manipulate. It's definitely easier to manipulate than the cage lock from the Spyderco Manix 2. It's cool. It's just, I've grown tired of it, honestly. Over the last 10 years, it's neat, but I'm bored with it, right? It's fun. A lot of Benchmade knives are really fun. A lot of people are going to tell me, what? You're crazy for not including it on the list. We have so many more options now. There's so many other things out there that bring me more joy than the axis lock from Benchmade knives. So while it's pretty good, it's not quite good enough to make my personal list. Moving on here, Protech side-opening automatic knives, or automatic knives in general that open sideways, right? I think Protech makes the best side-opening autos in the world. The problem with these is, while it is really satisfying to deploy the knife with the push of a button, the part that takes away from the fidget factor is having to hold the button down and then close the button. I like to be able to manipulate my knives with one hand, open and shut, right, over and over and over again. The process of closing it, since the spring is working against the blade on the way back down, kind of takes the fun away. They're still massively satisfying. So side opening autos, specifically Protech side opening autos, definitely have a lot of fidget factor. They're just lacking a little bit in the closing department. Moving on to the actual list, which, by the way, again, no particular order. Starting off with the knives you can actually get right now. This is the new CJRB proprietary lock. What do they call this? I keep wanting to call it the slide lock. Is it the recoil lock? That's what it is, the recoil lock. They have not implemented this lock on a lot of other knives. I actually think that this is really cool. I played with a couple of knives with it. These are not expensive, by the way. So for those of you looking for fidget factor and not wanting to spend a lot of money, believe me, there are more expensive knives on this list. But as far as budget fidget factor goes, that recoil lock is pretty good. I got pretty good at kind of whipping it in and out, and I found that I actually enjoy it more than the axis lock. A lot of people are going to disagree with me. Maybe it's because it's new. I like being able to put my index finger on it and just sort of whip it in and close. The problem is it still uses omega springs, which... there's, you know, after a few hundred or a few thousand flicks, you're running the risk more and more and more of breaking them. But it doesn't appear to be a massive issue. It's just something that I think about, right? I do appreciate that there are traction points on the left and right-hand side, so you can sort of pinch it like the axis lock, but you can also just pull it backwards with your index finger. I thought this was really cool and really innovative. Even though it's just a spin on something that already existed, it's cool. And fidget factor like this in the budget knife world is very welcome. I'm hoping we'll see more of it. I definitely wanted to include this one on the list. This is the CJRB Crag. I think they have a couple of different models with this lock. I enjoyed this one the most, though. Moving on here, definitely the Spyderco Smock. This is a button lock. Any button lock knife is going to have its own level of fidget factor. This thing also, you know, couples that button lock with really smooth operation. You have that sort of top flipper / regular flipper thing, and then you still have access to the thumb hole. Lots of different means of manipulation. It's very satisfying to deploy over and over and over again. You kind of whip it out, whip it closed. This is just cool. On top of that, it's just a great knife, right? I'm kind of combining fidget factor and, you know, with satisfaction with a good model, right? This knife has all of that. It is so satisfying to push that button and watch the blade drop, right? This is just an overall very satisfying knife in a lot of ways. Spyderco Smock definitely deserving of a place on this list. Moving on here, this is a weird one. The 8015. I did not like this knife at first, but the more that I played with it and the more that I understood the leverage points, I found that this was really fun to manipulate. And it's very easy to do one-handed. I mean, you have strength combined with fidget factor here. And I think that's cool, considering the best thing about most cold steel knives is that their locking system, the triad lock, is incredibly powerful. It's very durable, but it lacks in... It's just not as fun to play with because there's multiple hand... Like you can push your thumb down on it and kind of shake it shut. This thing is way cooler. You kind of pinch it and lift up on it, right, to get it to close, and then you can flick it out. You can reverse flick it, you thumb flick it right, and then you can pull that thing back, kind of whip it close. I found that I really, really enjoyed that. Considering it's a completely unique locking system created by Andrew Demko, the 8015 is in its own weird little world. It's crazy that it's so big and robust, something that you don't expect from a massively overbuilt knife. So not only does this have cool fidget factor, but it also makes using this knife pretty convenient, and it's an absolute tank. If you need that much from your folding knife, 8015, expensive knife through cold steel knives, but oh man. Super cool. Weird place for fidget factor to show up, but it absolutely exists here. Moving on here, I have to include both the Spyderco PM2 and Spyderco Para 3 in the same spot on this list. The combination of the compression lock and that opening hole, specifically on these knives, for whatever reason, everything is so perfectly placed. There are a lot of Spyderco knives out there, including the Shaman, that have a compression lock and a combination opening hole, right? But something about the positioning and shape of the PM2 and Para 3 just bring that fidget factor to the next level. With any Spyderco knife, you can do the Spidey drop, you can do the Spidey flick, you can do the thumb flick, you can do the whip in and out with the compression lock. So many different means of doing that. But because of the shape of the blade and the positioning of the hole, I've actually found, and I had another person show me their tricks on Instagram one time. This guy was opening the knife with every single finger. He almost got it with his pinky. Very impressive. These knives are awesome and very satisfying and nice. And the compression lock's very clicky, right? And again, that's the same way with a lot of Spyderco knives, but for some reason, the PM2 and Para 3 are just a little bit... I've got the PM2 right here. It's very satisfying to whip that thing in and out and just click it and open it. Oh, man. Same thing. Here's the Para 3, the sound of the Para 3, which is going to sound very similar. I actually kind of prefer the Para 3 over the PM2. Oh my gosh, these things are so much fun to play around with. They are ugly as all hell, but man, they are fun to play with. Highly recommendable. Moving on here, I mean, honestly, any OTF, but the Microtech knives are super cool. In fact, I'm going to get out my own. Microtech knives have a lot. This is an Ultratech. Go with any Microtech OTF, honestly, is going to have this kind of... This is a Microtech Combat Troodon you're hearing. It's very it just makes a lot of clicks and clacks, and the blade throws so hard, and it's so satisfying. If you've never handled an OTF and you've watched a movie with an OTF and they fire it and you've imagined what that felt like, no knife has come quite as close to that feeling for me, other than Microtech knives. Specifically the Ultratech and the Combat Troodon have really done it for me. It's just in and out, right? It's the nicest thing. These versus side opening autos is that they're substantially easier to close. You just pull back on the switch and it click, click, click. These knives have annoyed my wife more than anything else. And that's nothing against my wife. Honestly, nobody likes to sit next to a knife guy clicking an OTF in and out over and over again. That gets annoying very quickly. If you're not the one doing it, it's the most annoying thing in the world. Click, clack, click, clack, click, clack, while you're trying to watch the Great British Baking Show. Worst thing in the whole world for somebody who's not doing it. But for the person who's doing it, it is infinitely satisfying. Anybody who owns one of these knives will tell you exactly the same thing. Moving on here for the same reason, except one teeny tiny little extra detail. I'm going to be including the Guardian Tactical Recon 35 and the massive, this picture does not do it justice, the massive Guardian Tactical Recon 40. I actually have the Recon 40 right here. You can't see it, but I'll let you hear it. You ready? Bam! That thing is noisy. Not only are these knives a little bit louder, a little more clank, right? They have the steel plate under the firing switch, and they have bearings between the switch and the steel plate. On top of that, the firing switch is shaped better for the human thumb, which means they are much easier to actuate. With a Microtech knife, over time, it's going to wear your thumb out a little bit because the traction is a little bit more aggressive, the switch is a little bit more aggressive, and there's a little more friction there because they don't have the bearings in the switch. These guys, anything that might slow you down or fatigue you with a Microtech knife is simply not present in these things. I'm not including a lot of the less expensive OTFs because, as I've said many times, I don't care what anybody says. The Guardian Tactical Recon OTFs and the Microtech OTFs are head and shoulders over everything in terms of build quality, in terms of satisfaction, firing power, right? Firing quality, everything. Fit and finish, materials, all of that stuff. I got a list of 1,000 things I can throw at it. I've made this argument many times. But the Guardian Tactical Recon OTFs are really, really cool because of that switch. If you've been on the fence about these, like you've been a big Microtech person, by all means, continue to buy Microtech knives because they're excellent. But also consider adding a Guardian Tactical Recon 35, which is the smaller guy at about 8 inches, or the Recon 40, which is the big guy at like 9.5. This thing is a freaking tank. It is huge. Very satisfying to deploy. And it's unlikely, because of the way they do the chassis, that you're going to experience a failure at any common rate. Moving on here, a lot more expensive, but very, very fidgety. I'm getting deja vu. I can't remember if I've made a video like this before, or talked about this before. I think I have with the, this is the Olamic Cutlery Whippersnapper. They've got a lot of fidgety knives, like the busker you could put in here. I've honestly never handled a busker, but this guy has the right placement for the finger hole. It is a front flipper. This is one of my favorite front flippers ever. The positioning of it, the size of it, ease of manipulation with a front flipper, and then, of course, the access to that thumb hole. You can do the reverse flick, the Spidey drop, the flick out. It's a frame lock. It's a frame lock. Easy to manipulate with the frame lock, easy to manipulate with whatever finger you're trying to open it with, but it also has that thumb flipper element. It's also amazingly smooth, runs on bearings. There's a lot of other knives that I could have thrown right here that are also titanium frame locks, that are front flippers, that are, that have the thumb hole. For whatever reason, I found that this one in particular was just infinitely satisfying. It was so fun to do it over and over and over again. There's no part on this knife that tired out my hands. I love the sound of it. I love the feel of it. Right on top of that, they make so many different versions of this. They're expensive. These are US made items. They use titanium and M390 or materials like that, right? In this case, we've got a Damascus pivot collar. So you get to enjoy all of the, the feeling, right? You get to enjoy the satisfaction and the feeling of everything, but also the ergonomic lines and the look of this. It's also a very, very functional cutting tool. It's expensive, yeah. A lot of inexpensive knives cut, right? We're talking about fidget factor here. A lot of inexpensive knives have fidget factor. For whatever reason, I enjoyed this one more than a lot of other knives that have similar build, idea in the deployment philosophy, right? Just really good. Love this knife. Moving on here, yeah, sorry. We're getting into the section of this where these are kind of unobtainable knives right now. The Protech Malibu. This is a button lock flipper, manual, running on bearings. There's other versions of this out there. Protech knocked it out of the park with this guy. You push that button, that blade will free fall. For whatever reason, the Malibu in particular is very satisfying on that button. I think it's the overall simplistic look that this knife does exactly what you expect it to do. You push that button and the blade just free falls. It'll just close right every time. You pull that flipper tab, the detent's tuned perfectly. It's going to deploy. Between pulling the flipper tab and pushing that button, I have probably deployed, the one that I used to have, I probably deployed it 1,000 times. God, it is so fun, and you can do it infinitely. This thing will never tire your hand out. I love the sound of it. I love the look of it, right? It's also a very functional tool that's using premium materials. Hopefully there will be more of these available. I will leave a link right down below where you can at least sign up for notifications, but as of right now, we're all just going to have to wait. I'm guessing that at some point these will become substantially more available. Moving on here. Honestly, these Hawk designs, I could put any number of them in there, but I haven't handled that many. I've only handled a couple of knives with this Hawk, like the ZTO 500 and this Hawk Orbit. But I enjoyed the Orbit more. Not only is it using that fidgety sort of, it's only on one side. It looks like it might function a lot like an axis lock, right? This thing has a flipper tab and this lock that you can use to whip in and out. That Hawk lock has an interesting closing point where the detent sucks it in. It's almost like two different... Anyways, not only is it incredibly strong, incredibly solid, the way that they design it, it keeps debris out of itself really, really well. It makes so many clicks and clacks. This knife, go to any channel that's reviewed this knife, they're all going to say the same thing. It goes click, 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 all the way out. It sounds like you're reloading a Glock. It is so crazy. I love this thing. It's a really wild looking knife, right? The aesthetic is going to be for some people and not for others. It's also very expensive and very hard to get your hands on. But if you do get your hands on this, or you talk to somebody who's had it, they're going to tell you the same thing. Very fun to flip, very fun to deploy. Lots of different little things you can do, and every single time you close it or open it, it makes so many interesting different little clicks and clacks. Man, I loved playing with this guy. Love it. Moving on here, I think we might be approaching, yeah. Truthfully, everything in this list was in no particular order except this guy. This guy combines almost every element of the knives on this list into one beautiful design. I talk about this in a video that you guys are going to get on Sunday, but I own this knife now in full titanium. You can deploy this thing with the thumb stud. You can wheel it out with a thumb stud. You can reverse flick it with the slot. You can wheel it out with the slot. You can whip it in and out with the shark lock. You can pull the shark lock and it'll fall into the closed position. Because of, it's the combination of that and again, a lot of what I get with the Hawk Orbit. All the different clicks and clacks. That shark lock slide, it sort of click and then slide. And then it recoils back into position, whether it's closed or open. It snaps open. It has that big clack when you close it. Man, here it is right here. I'm going to let you guys listen to it. Right? You hear that? Oh, let me give you just the opening sound. Oh, this thing is so wicked. Don't worry, there's lots. I got another video on this knife. I got an unboxing of this knife. I got another video coming on Sunday where I talk about that thing. I love this knife. I love it. On top of that, the lock is unbelievably strong. This knife is very robust and very capable. The only downside is there's a massive demand for this thing, and it is just not quite available yet. But I've heard that it is going to become much more widely available, right? We've already got a couple of different steels on this thing, 20CV and 3V. They've done a couple of coated blades. They do a lot of different colors. They do full titanium like the one that I've got. And I'm hearing that they're going to mess around maybe with some different blade shapes, right? Ideally, this blade comes to cold steel. I know that's what everybody wants. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I sure hope that it does. This thing is the Fidget god of knives. And it's actually functional. It's not just meant to be played with. You can take this thing out and use it, and the shark lock works. It is convenient to deploy this thing and use it and put it away. The downside to this thing is it's massive and heavy, right? Whether you go the G10 one and especially the titanium one, it's heavy. But to get that level of fidget factor in a knife that's so big is so not common in this knife. There's a reason that everybody's talking about this knife. There's a reason it's so popular. It's freaking expensive, and that's going to drive people crazy. But this is a U.S.-made knife. Just everything that the modern knife enthusiast want. I mean, I understand if it's not your cup of tea aesthetically, but a lot of us, those of us who care about fidget factor and ease of deployment and all that stuff, this checks so many boxes for so many people. I'm projecting here and I'm making it sound like my opinions are shared by everybody. I know that they're not, but god dang. The Demkos knew exactly what they were doing when they made this thing. I love it. All right, it's been long enough. Guys, that's going to conclude my list. Like I said, everything that's in this video will at least have a link down below. Some of the knives are not available, but a lot of them are. So check those out if you want to get your hands on something. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.